Hello dear students. In this particular video, we will discuss about dismissals, downsizing, and then also talk about employee retention, turnover, and then we'll come into the different strategies that can be used to retain employees. So what do we understand by dismissal? So dismissal is when an employer chooses to require the employee to leave, generally for a reason which is the fault of an employee. That's when we say an employee is dismissed. And the word that we very commonly use now is the employee is fired. Employee is fired on the grounds of unsatisfactory performance for misconduct or lack of qualification for the job or changed requirements of the job. For all these reasons, the employee is asked to leave before the contract ends, and then very often there is a severance package that is also given as a compensation to the employee to make sure that he's able to find something on his own with that compensation as such. Layoff and retrenchment is something that we also need to understand in this context as a reason uh, where an employee leaves the organization. Layoff is a temporary refusal of work. Wherein an organization which was having an employee working in the organization doing a certain job, now because of the changing economic conditions, because of a recession or because of a change in the industry dynamics, there is a shortage in terms of consumer demand. What happens is automatically production gets stalled. So when an organization is unable to give its employee sufficient work, when there is a situation when employees are in a surplus and the organization is unable to give them meaningful work or enough work, that is when the organization cannot continue to keep those employees. That is when they temporarily ask them to leave. This is called a layoff. Retrenchment, on the other hand, is a permanent refusal of work. Retrenchment is where an employee is dismissed or fired or punished and asked to leave the organization as a disciplinary action for having not adhered to the rules and the policy or any related job instruction of the organization. Two other terminologies that we need to understand is downsizing and right sizing. Many organizations which have an excess of labor or where they realize that they want to really trim the workforce, make it more effective, make it more agile, make it more efficient, right? And the reasons could be the changing dynamics of the business industry. They want to make it more competitive, or there is technology or some sort of a restructuring that has happened within the organization, wherein in the current situation with the kind of requirement and the changes that we made, the number of employees who were there with us earlier may not be required to continue work in the organization, and that is when the organization decides that they want to downsize. So downsizing is a permanent reduction of a company's workforce through the elimination of unproductive workers or divisions. So wherever we feel that employees are excess or there are certain activities or jobs in the department that we feel are redundant and not productive anymore, that's where we downsize. Right sizing is the process of restructuring. Where an organization is going through a restructuring process, they are delayering the organization or creating, bringing in a certain sort of robustness and agility into the organization. Where they try to revamp the entire organization structure, revamp the hierarchy, revamp the departments. When a certain sort of restructuring happens to enable the structure to support the strategy of the organization. Right sizing is bringing in the right number of employees. Sometimes it can lead to downsizing and reallocation, reassignment, realignment of the workforce and reassignment of job responsibilities also happens during the right sizing. Right now, when an employee leaves the organization, especially mostly in the case of a voluntary resignation, in the case of a layoff, in the case of an employee dismissal, in the case of a retrenchment, the organization knows the reason why the employee is leaving. But in the case of a voluntary resignation, where an employee was thought to be working for the organization and the organization believed that this employee is a prospective employee or an employee who will continue to work and will not have the intention to leave, right now suddenly puts in his papers and wants to resign. So the firm wants to know, the HR professional, the organization want to know the reason why this employee is leaving. And that is where we plan for an exit interview. Exit interview is an interview that is conducted for an employee who has put in his papers and is wanting to leave. So these are the stages of how it can be done. We plan the interview carefully, and then without talking much about the reasons behind it, we tend to get to the point wherein we as an organization want to know whether is there something that the organization has gone wrong with. Have we done something wrong? Or was the reason for leaving, or that usually an employee leaves because he is unhappy with the supervisor, the leader, the policy, or with the emoluments. So whatever be the reason, it is important for an organization to find out that this is the reason, right? And also to know whether this reason was earlier expressed in some form or in any other way, wherein the organization, did not take notice, or whether the organization's authorities were negligent of it. So we need to understand all of that. So describe the situation. So maybe ask the employee to narrate one or two incidents, listen to the employee fully without being judgmental, and then finally, since the employee has made a decision, you wish the employee the very best for his future or for her future, and then you decide to work on the severance package, and then you try to see what feedback you can take from this interview, what corrective measures and actions you can take, so that you make sure that good employees and employees who were considered to be prospective employees, or those who were considered to be good talent for the organization, will not leave. So henceforth, good talent should not be leaving. So attrition within the organization should be reduced, and good talent must be retained within the organization. So the exit process sometimes will also include the outplacement counseling. So sometimes practical and psychological assistance is given, and this is mostly in the case of those employees uh, who are laid off, or those who have been retrenched because of the reason of an organization, because the organization did not have work to give them, and that is why they were asked to leave. So it affects when an employee loses his or her job, it affects them. So that is where the firm should be able to come to a position where they are able to help, guide, um, counsel them, and also identify opportunities where they can go using their networking connections, using their references. See where if they are able to find that there is a job that they can place these employees, or ask them to go and attend those interviews, or find an opportunity for them, it should be done. And then, as I told you, an exit interview definitely needs to be conducted for those employees who are voluntarily resigning, so that we are able to get to the root of the problem and uh, find out what corrective measures and actions that can be taken to make sure that good employees do not leave the organization. Right. So managing turnover and retention is a tremendous challenge. Right. There is attrition in almost every industry, but in certain industries and certain organizations, attrition could be very high. You always need to compare your attrition rate with that of the industry attrition rate. If the industry attrition rate is greater than your organization's attrition rate, then that's not a reason to worry. But if your organization's attrition rate is much greater than the industry rate, then that is a cause of worry, because which means employees are leaving your organization in much more greater numbers than what they are doing with your competitors. So employee turnover is the proportion of your workforce who leave during a particular period of time. The number of employees who are resigning or quitting because of several reasons other than layoff and other than retrenchment. So what are the reasons for employees to quit work? One is employee dissatisfaction, or there are better alternatives and prospects for them. They get an opportunity to work with a competitors at a higher pay, higher package, and with a higher position. It could be a planned change as well. Some employees also plan and say that they would want to work in this organization for a certain period, and they want to make a move. They don't want to get stuck in one particular place. And fourthly, very often it could be because of a bad experience. It could be a conflict with teammates. It could be a conflict with the supervisor or the leader, right? Some clashes, some reason of friction or conflict within the organization, and if it has led to a very bitter experience, then the employee definitely makes that decision to leave. What are the predictors of employee turnover? Right, some of the areas that we can work on to see how the organization and organizations decisions, or organizations context does not become a cause for employee to leave the organization. One is we need to constantly work on organization commitment and job satisfaction, constantly keep thinking how we can get employees to be more connected, to have employees be more satisfied with their work. Secondly, increase and improve the quality of interaction, quality of uh, communication between the employee and the supervisor. So we need to establish a good rapport because very often this happens to be the bone of contention. This happens to be the reason why a good number of good employees leave the organization, to see how superior subordinate relationships are well managed, and any issues or any sort of difficulty needs to be sorted out quite properly. Third reason is role clarity. When an employee is unclear about his or her role and job, and feels stuck in a situation or is unable to know what exactly to do, or there is no unity of command, there is no proper unity of direction, and if there is role, absolutely no role clarity or role ambiguity in question, all of this could lead to an employee feeling dissatisfied or upset about the nature of work. Fourth, if a job is very poorly designed, and if it includes long working hours or very rigorous or tedious assignments or tasks that needs to be accomplished, so a job also sometimes becomes an important reason. So we need to look into all of these factors, and lastly, to look at how we can improve the group morale, how we can improve the team's productivity quotient, or increase the cohesiveness among the members of the group. So a lot of team building activities, a lot of interesting exercises must be taken up so that the team is able to bond well, is able to come together, and the leader of the team has to play a very important role in keeping his flock or her flock together, right? So coming to the next aspect of managing voluntary turnovers. So what do we do? So voluntary turnover is when an employee leaves the job, whether that's because they got another job elsewhere or took an internal transfer or retired, whatever be the case, right? So these voluntary turnovers sometimes affect the organization because these were employees who were productive and contributing, and when these employees whom the organization thought will never leave, when they leave, automatically their jobs become vacant. And especially if an employee quits at the tactical level and at the strategic level, at the leadership level or a position, then it's very difficult to find a replacement. Hence, it is very important that the organization is constantly keeping an eye on all those kind of issues that can crop up, which can uh, instigate an employee to quit the organization and look for a better prospect or a better opportunity elsewhere. So this is my last slide. The last slide is going to talk about what are the strategies, what strategies can organizations employ to make the work experience of an employee much better, to increase job satisfaction, to make sure that the employee stays committed and dedicated, right? And the employee is able to contribute well to the organization. The first one is definitely to invest on employees' careers. The moment we are able to know good and prospective employees are there, we need to nurture those employees, give them opportunities, allow them to take initiatives, give them better platforms, groom them, and then slowly prepare them for higher order jobs in the organization. Second is to focus on managers. A lot of times the friction is between the superior and subordinate. So managers have to be well trained enough. Managers must be made sensitive to understand the needs and requirements of their team. The manager must be a motivator, must be a role model, must be somebody who is able to handle issues or firmly, and does not discriminate or takes everybody into confidence. Thirdly, recognize employees' contribution, which automatically boils down to appreciation, rewards, and recognition. Right? Fourth is to reassess compensation to find out good employees, productive employees, contributing employees are benefited much better than others or benefited much higher than others. Consider your benefits package in terms of incentives, in terms of comp and ben. Find out what you can give to the employee to make him or her satisfied, and that doesn't always have to be monetary benefits, but also look for a lot of non-monetary benefits. Sixth is to be able to allow a good amount of flexibility in terms of creating a work-life balance so that the work does not become too pressurizing, work does not become too stressful, allowing for a proper balance between personal life and professional priorities of an employee. Seventh is to create pathways for growth. So to have a proper career planning and development program to be enabling to identify where good talent can be utilized in the organization in the future, right? We need to work on organization culture because that's what uh, possibly gets felt within the organization when employees have to come together, understand the organization, and work towards what is right, and be able to connect and bond well and be able to absolutely align themselves with a sense of belonging to the organization. The next aspect is to prioritize hybrid and remote options. Wherever possible, flexi time, flexi tour, work from home, remote work options, all of this can be considered. We need to consider, right? So allowing the employees a greater amount of balance in terms of what can be done. Focus on flexibility, allowing employees, giving employees the flexibility in terms of work schedules, in terms of job, right? So not being too very rigid with deadlines and schedules, but giving enough of time and opportunities and resources for employees to be able to execute their responsibilities and the tasks that they have undertaken to the best possible way. So giving employees the tools for success in terms of training, in terms of resource, in terms of coaching, in terms of mentoring, and then finally being able to support employees' well-being. Constantly looking out for areas and reasons where we can help an employees to do well, right? So if we are able to consider these um, areas and focus on making the employee the most important person in the organization and doing everything possible that enables an employee to connect well with the organization's strategy, to be aware of his or her job, to be able to accept responsibilities from their superiors and then be able to uh, complete the task and be accountable to the manager and to the organization, and then having a wonderful time in the organization, considering the organization like a second home, and everything should be done in a happy and in a very meaningful and a productive manner, where everybody should have the sense that they are contributing to the growth and productivity of the organization. When they are, when they have that sort of a feeling, then automatically firms don't have to really try hard to retain employees, because employees who consider themselves, who consider themselves as those who can contribute well, and those who feel that they have a sense of gratitude and a sense of giving back to the organization is there. And those are employees who will stay dedicated, committed, and loyal